Splatoon 3 wasn't originally high on my priority list leading up to its release. I thought I was already fine with just having 2 and didn't really feel the need to spend $80 on another game. Then everyone else picked it up at launch, prompting me to get it myself to avoid missing out, and over 800 hours later, I am not the same inkling I was before. Splatoon 3 has become debatably the best game in the series for me. Between its fun, fast-paced gameplay, its tight controls, its somewhat functional balancing, its wide variety of fun weapons and modes, its surplus of quality of life improvements, and the continued immersion of this fantastic world. Unfortunately, despite being the best one, that doesn't mean it's flawless, because as I've established previously, this game has a lot of problems. I could probably guess what your biggest issue with the game is. If it isn't the netcode, or the matchmaking, or the painfully slow update cycle, or the kit distribution, or the Splatfest, or chargers, or Trizuka, or respawn Punisher, or all the time-limited new modes, or the flimsy storytelling in both campaigns, or the refusal to commit to rebalancing the game for the better until right when it was about to die, it's the maps. It's got to be the maps. The general consensus is that Splatoon 3's map list is easily the weakest in the series. While I personally don't find the selection to be awful, at least after a certain point in the game's life, I still can't deny that this game's maps lack a lot of the spark that made those from 1 and even 2 stand out. Between some samey layouts, issues with the layouts themselves that may or may not be mode specific, and questionable at best handling of returning maps, expect to see a lot more negativity on this ranking compared to the prior two. Also, while I'm still ranking the maps in this game from a fun, casual perspective rather than a competitively viable one, since I actually bothered to play ranked in this game, I will be taking into consideration how the maps play on some of the ranked modes. Not completely, since some maps are really good on certain modes and really bad on others, but still. I'm also not going to be ranking most of the tricolor layouts separately, since I feel like they can still be lumped in with their main counterparts respectively. With my rule set out of the way, it's time to drop the hottest ranking this drizzle season. Listen up, it's going down. I've seen a lot of debate as to what the absolute worst map in Splatoon 3 is. Hell, even throughout this game's life, I often struggled to choose what map I should rank dead last. Eventually, however, I settled on one map I see not much flame thrown towards compared to others, despite how hard it butchers the original vision of the map and goes directly against everything you need to make a good shooter map. You may argue about another map being less functional or more awkward and annoying, but personally, I see no better choice for dead last than Hammerhead Bridge. If you saw my Splatoon 1 map ranking, you'll know that I ranked Hammerhead around the upper middle. It was far from my favorite map in that game, but I still found it to be a unique and fun one. Fast forward to 3, and what the hell happened here? All the strategic terrain, cover, elevation, and pretty sights are gone. Even the giant grate down the middle, the map's defining feature, is nowhere to be seen. This map has more in common with Walleye Warehouse than the original Hammerhead. And to be honest, that comparison is kind of a huge insult to Walleye. As bad as it was, at least it had a few side routes, one of which could take you into the enemy base, and it didn't take too long to get to mid. Hammerhead is just a line with no viable side routes and only one finicky way to attack the enemy base. And it feels like it takes an eternity to reach mid with how long the map is. It's annoying enough if even one enemy slips past mid into your base, so when your whole team is wiped out, good luck stopping or getting past their straight charge into your base. Like, why on earth did they have to butcher a pre-existing functional layout this badly? I understand why you would redesign this map since it was under construction before and said construction is done now, so it provides a cool world building detail, but like, you could have done that and still made a good, or at least functional map. I've seen a lot of people use Mahi Mahi Resort and Flounder Heights as prime examples of this game's poor treatment of Splatoon 1 maps, and don't get me wrong, I can see why, but at least those maps retain some of their original spirit. At least they're still unique and fun to play to some extent. There is not even the slightest trace of fun or faith to the original to be found within this game's Hammerhead Bridge. It is overly narrow, cramped, dull, repetitive, frustrating, snowbally, and an utter chore to play on every mode. The only remotely redeeming quality to come from this map was this cute drawing of Callie in a business suit. Otherwise, this is the bottom of the barrel for this series' maps, and I would genuinely be shocked if the series ever gives us another map even remotely as unplayable as this. Please, for the love of COD, don't let the next entry be this offensive.
Not Wahoo World!
Look, I know a lot of you are still mad about the Splatoon 1 maps being worse or the new maps being dull, but I don't think any of you realize just how insulting of a decision it was to bring Wahoo World of all maps back. We could have gotten Starfish Main Stage, Snapper Canal, the motherfucking Reef. Literally any other map from 2 would have been a better choice to bring back than this torture chamber nobody likes. This also extends to the Splatoon 1 maps as well. A lot of that game's most beloved maps did not make it to 2, and when they finally returned in 3 after years of dormancy, they were unnecessarily butchered or changed for the worse. But Wahoo World, a map from 2 that literally nobody likes, got to come back immediately in the next game on release without changes. Yeah, you heard me right. Aside from a poll, they made 0 changes to this map to make it fun, or even at least better. It remains just as tedious and annoying as ever, with its bottleneck heavy layout and horrible rotating mid that restricts you from moving half the time. It's just as frustrating, boring, and punishing as it was in 2. And the fact that I barely see anyone bring this map up or use it for footage for this game says enough. Bringing this map back was a mistake. Making this map in the first place was a mistake. Its mere existence makes my blood boil. And the only silver lining to it being here is that the next game can be spared from its awfulness. I hope. I mean, come on. There's no way they'll bring back the same shitty map twice in a row, right?
That's it?
I remember when I first saw this game's announcement trailer nearly 4 years ago, goddamn. I was wowed by my first look at Scorched Gorge. It looks so cool and gritty and hardcore and unlike anything I had ever seen in the series before. And when I finally got to play it over a year and a half later, I was so disappointed. The terrain in the bases is dull and awkward, with minimal routes to mid, most of which only go one way. It's really boring to maneuver around, and especially annoying to fight in. Mid is not much better. It's just a few tiny lower sections, a big block, and a couple of thin grates. Said grates are your only way into a base on Turf War and Zones, and even on the other modes, the added ramp is still risky to use. It's such a nothing map, which already sounds bad enough as is, until you remember that this is this game's poster map. The first map we ever saw in this game, and the one shown off in most of the marketing, demos, and other promotional stuff. And it's this bad. Not only does it paint the rest of the game in a negative light, but it's also a huge embarrassment compared to past poster maps, since Urchin Underpass was pretty solid and the Reef was straight up the best map in the series. And that's not even the worst part. The beta version of this map seen in early trailers and screenshots looks so much more fun than the final version, with wider and more dynamic terrain, far more possible routes, and get this, inkable walls. Like, this isn't even a case of it could have been better. It straight up was better before it was unnecessarily gutted. You already had the perfect introduction to this game. Why on earth did you put in the extra effort to mess it up? What a fucking embarrassment. The next game's poster map better not be as lifeless as this. While not the worst map, Brinewater Springs is probably my pick for the most uninspired map in this game. Like, wow, 2 straight ramps leading down to a cramped middle section with tiny, useless platforms off to the sides. What a unique, fun layout that takes advantage of the map's setting and the game's mechanics. The minimal routes to and around mid make enemy movements very predictable, and the lack of effective routes out of your base makes this map highly lockout heavy. I considered ranking this as the worst Splatoon 3 original map for the longest time, but upon further thought, its pretty visuals, the fact that it can be fun to drop down from the ramp, and the map using its full space better than, and just generally being less insulting than the bottom 3, I decided to at least rank it above Scorch. Still a bad map though. Hopefully we get an actually good traditional Japanese style map at some point, and with Team Past recent victory, the odds seem at least a little likely.
Vehicular manslaughter!
Mincemeat Metalworks is bad.
I agree with that.
Yeah, let's face it, there was no way this map would be any higher than D tier. Like, seriously, is there anyone out there who actually likes this map? Does anyone enjoy having to take the same routes every match due to how boxed in and restrictive the layout is? Does anyone have fun getting sniped by an E-leader from across the map due to a lack of good cover or flanks? E-leaders are already my most hated weapon to fight against due to their long range and one-hit kill. So having a map that favors them and only them fills me with so much joy. Some of the ranked modes at least get a few more movement options, but they're not enough to save this map from being garbage, thematically, visually, and mechanically. I like the cars and the poles though, they were funny.
Too bad, SpongeBob, you gotta ride the eel.
What? A Splatoon 3 map ranking that doesn't put Eeltail Alley in the bottom 5? What nonsense is this? Anyway, this is another generally hated map, and for good reason. It's very narrow, it has next to no effective movement options, it's extremely scuffed and lockout heavy, and it refuses to take advantage of its its bridge on the ranked modes, especially on zones where it's straight up cut out. Moving around mid feels so awkward due to the lack of escape routes and the advantage the enemies above you have. Like, seriously, Splatsville? This is your Urchin Underpass? It leads to every match here feeling like the same boring, annoying mosh pit. So why is it not any lower? Honestly, I kind of don't mind this map in Turf War. Yeah, it's the baby mode, which is at its worst in 3, and it's still not good here, but it actually tries to take advantage of the bridge, and it can be fun casually on this mode. Still though, it has a ton of problems and still feels straight up unfair on the ranked modes, and said feeling of unfairness could have been avoided if they kept the beta layout for the final game. Seriously, you already had perfectly fine layouts for Scorch and Eeltail. Why the f did you put in the extra effort to make them way worse before release?
2 sewer levels and 5 maps. Awesome.
Undertow Spillway is so close to being a good map. It has really solid bases with various routes and defensive points, and there's some decent terrain in mid too, but none of that matters when there are 0 ways around this map's narrow mid. If you want to reach the other side of the map, you're forced to go through the cramped trenches that leave you very vulnerable. This was a very easy problem to fix. All they had to do was punch out the glass panes or add small routes around them akin to Snapper Canal. And they never did it. Even when this map got a rework in the fresh season of 24, they adjusted nearly everything but left the fundamental issue with the map untouched. Sure, the tunnels and spawn extensions they added were nice, but not nearly enough. What a shame. This map was so easy to make good with so simple of a change, yet the devs never did it, probably out of fear that they changed something too much. Newsflash, map designers and balancing team, did you know that sometimes taking a huge risk can prove to be a good thing? Why even be so scared about making a change you know the fans will only appreciate, especially after making many that either divided them or just pissed them off?
Barnacles.
Barnacle and Dime is such a frustrating map, not because it's annoying to play on, far from it, but rather because it has one of the coolest, most stunning backdrops in the series, yet none of that is reflected in its bare bones layout. Remember when Splatoon maps were actually designed to fit with their themes or settings rather than just using them as a cool backdrop? Regardless of their quality, they were designed specifically to fit a shopping mall, a skate park, a concert venue, etc. They didn't just look like they were at their respective settings, they felt like it too. New Albacore Hotel from 2, for example, despite probably being an even worse map than Barnacle, at least had a layout that was unique and somewhat fitting of its theme. In most of 3's original maps, however, it feels like there's a vast disconnect between the stages and their themes, as if they design an extremely basic layout first and then plop them on a random background afterward, rather than organically weaving them into their settings. Such a bland layout could have been plastered on any background. Seriously, this is the 3rd game. How have we only gone backwards? I know I'm rambling on about a general issue with the maps rather than the map itself, but like, look at this. What do you want me to say? Yeah, it's functional, it has some decent terrain and movement options, but we shouldn't have to strive for a functional map, but rather a good one. Barnacle is so mediocre that I killed my faith in this game for a whole season. It has a cool background and basically nothing else.
What do you call a 3-humped camel?
I audibly groaned when I saw Humpback Pump Track revealed to be returning in this game. After 2 pretty good retro map picks for the previous 2 seasons, they seriously chose to bring back one of the most mediocre maps from 2. Then when it came out, I noticed that it actually wasn't as bad as I remember. It might just be because of 3's fundamentally better controls and special design than 2, but I digress. I honestly don't really mind Humpback in this game, yet it's still on the side for a dull aesthetic and some awkward terrain that doesn't bode well with the ranked modes for different reasons. A decent amount of movement options carry it a little, but not by much. This was far from a map I wanted to see back so soon, but this game's S2 map selection was already in the gutter due to Wahoo World coming back on release, so it's not like this map makes it any worse.
Count how many sand is here, Omega. That's your first mission.
Apparently, a lot of people really like Umami Ruins. I don't know why. Yeah, it has moderately decent terrain and some movement options, not to mention it got a nice facelift in the last season, but like, it's still a narrow Tetris block at the end of the day. It honestly feels unfinished, especially in its cramped mid. It's as if they forgot to give this map a proper lower section beyond the initial drop and just left mid as tiny as it is now. Seriously, just look at the overhead map. Does it not look like something's missing? There are at least a few decent movement options here and there, especially as of the last season, and it does look a lot nicer than Scorch Gorge. As far as Tetris maps go, this one's a relatively okay one. I don't mind coming here every now and again for a quick skirmish, but this is far from the best this series can do with its maps.
That's the best you can do!
Hagglefish Market is the best brand new map from this game's first year. and it's C tier. If that doesn't prove how awful this game's maps were for the longest time, I don't know what will. Anyway, this map is pretty flat, with a relatively uninteresting spawn and routes that try to funnel you into mid. When you finally reach mid, you'll likely spend the match mindlessly shooting and flinging bombs at the other side, since if you try to head over there yourself, you'll likely get pummeled by the Slayers or shot dead by the backline on the tarp. Luckily, this map has side routes, both of which are overly narrow, cramped, and in range of high sniping positions. I know it's still something, and this map is definitely more playable and open than the other 4 brand new maps at launch, but should this mediocre choke point collection really have been the gold standard of the map design in this series' 3rd game? The sooner we get to B tier, the better. We just have 1 and a 6 more maps that we have to slog through.
Time for school! Time for school!
Inkblot Art Academy was a staple map back in Splatoon 2, and I get why they brought it back so soon. Despite that, I still have no strong feelings on this map, one way or the other. It has some good routes to mid, but also plenty of restrictions that kinda cripple the map. Basically, everything I said about this map back in 2's ranking still applies here. I will say though, that this map can actually be pretty damn fun on tower control and clan blitz specifically, due to the added routes that make the map far more fun to traverse. On the other modes that lack said routes, however, yeah, I'd much rather play on some of the other maps.
I'll take the Triforce of Courage to protect me.
The main hook of this game's Splatfest is the new mode Tricolor Turf War, where 2 teams gang up on a 3rd team on a modified version of an existing map. As I stated earlier, I'm not ranking any of these modified layouts, since I feel like they're similar enough to the map's base layouts for me to lump them all in with their proper entries, with the exception of the Triforce-shaped Scorch Gorge, made for the Legend of Zelda Splatfest. It shouldn't technically count, since the game and wiki still considers it Scorch Gorge, but to me, it's a brand new Shifty Station-esque map with a skin of Scorch, so I thought I'd give it an honorable mention where I'd rank it if it truly counted. Anyway, you're fighting on a Triforce. That's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, it's small, it's crowded, and it's hard to move on, but still, the novelty of fighting on a Triforce carries it. And besides, it's a completely new map made just for the new Splatfest exclusive mode. If only every Splatfest had a brand new dedicated tricolor map instead of just 2 of them. Though, given the quality of this game's maps thus far, maybe it's for the best that Shifty Stations didn't come back. Thankfully, we are finally about to reach the good stuff. Wait, Mr. Grizz? How are you not dead? You've been floating in space for like 2 years. Is this the part where I rank all the Salmon Run maps? Salmon Run in Splatoon 3 is amazing. It builds off its counterpart from 2, but it added more bosses, made lessers more of a threat, and introduced the godsend that is egg throwing. At times, I would honestly rather play it over the main PvP for the aforementioned fun gameplay, the valuable rewards for the most part, and a pretty solid selection of new maps, even if the new pace massively hurt the returning maps from 2. This game also introduced Big Run, an event that happened once every 3 months where the Salmonids would invade one of the multiplayer maps. In addition to the dedicated maps, I will be ranking those as they function as Salmon Run maps. With all that out of the way, it's time to go to work. At number 14, dead last to the surprise of absolutely no one, Marooner's Bay. What was already a boring and tedious sight before went to a borderline unplayable one here. You're given next to no room to move most of the time, which is kind of important with how strict and deadly this mode is in this game. Avoid it at all costs, unless you want to tank your rank. Number 13, Spawning Grounds. The fact that this went from the second best Salmon Run map in 2 to the second worst in this game just goes to show how much the new style of Salmon Run does not work with the old maps. It feels extremely cramped and hard to get around, especially on high tide where half the map is graded. Maybe it's for the best they didn't bring Arc Polaris back. At number 12, the worst Big Run map is motherfucking Wahoo World. How does this map manage to consistently suck ass on every mode? This is the best it's ever been, and it still sucks. The lack of elevation around the basket on high and low tide makes it a nightmare to avoid certain attacks. Number 11, Undertow Spillway. Overly cramped and annoying to get around thanks to all the walls. It's only above Wahoo for at least having some elevation. Number 10, Salmonid's Smokeyard. Call me crazy, but I think this map fits 3's Salmon Run a lot better than it did 2's. The egg throwing makes getting eggs between the islands much easier. It's still a little cramped and annoying, but at least it's playable now. Number 9, Umami Ruins. A good amount of inkable walls walls, but Umami's fundamentally cramped layout does not do its Big Run variant any favors. Number 8, Inkblot Art Academy. Equal parts nicely open and choke point heavy. It can be fun, but it's far from the best. Number 7, Barnacle and Dime. I swear, this is where the maps start getting good. It's a bit flat, but there's thankfully just enough elevation and movement options to help you get around and fulfill your quota. Number 6, Eeltail Alley. This is the most you'll ever see anyone praise Eeltail. There's plenty of open space, a fair amount of elevation, and a surprising amount of new routes and inkable walls. If Eeltail was like this normally, it would slap. Number 5, Gone Fishin' Hydroplan. We have finally reached an original map in this game designed specifically for Salmon Run. For all the problems the PvP maps had, it's a big surprise that they went 4 for 4 with amazing new Salmon Run maps in this game, taking advantage of the new mechanics brilliantly. Gone Fishin' is no exception with its unique fortress layout and elevation differences. I find it to be the weakest of the 4 newcomers due to a lack of outer paintable walls and a clunky low tide layout, but it's still great. Number 4, Jammin' Salmon Junction. A king of the hill type layout where you mow down salmonids as they try to march up the hill towards the basket. It's a ton of fun, even if high tide can get a little cramped. At number 3, the best Big Run map is Grand Splatlands Bowl. Finally, a Big Run map made with Big Run in mind. Not only are there plenty of ways to get around, but the added cannons make getting eggs back to the basket a breeze. I was actually able to grind all the way up to and beat hazard level max during the Grand Big Run, something I never did for any of the other maps. It provided a great sneak peek for the Grand Festival's main event too. Number 2, Sockeye Station. The defining Salmon Run map of this game, with a super streamlined layout that's easy to navigate and optimize regardless of the hazard level. It feels surprisingly fair, especially for such a chaotic mode, and it's definitely the best map to learn how to play Salmon Run in this game. And number 1, the best Salmon Run map in the series is Bone Rattle Arena. Not only does it have the best setting, at least in this game, but it also has by far the best layout. There are tons of inkable walls and elevated points, and the surplus of ink rails makes navigating the map and avoiding salmonid attacks a breeze. This is the only main map I've at least gotten the bronze badge for, and it still hasn't gotten old for me. Overall, Salmon Run in this game is an absolute blast, and its amazing new maps are a big part of why. I can't wait to see what they do next with PvE in this series, since there's no way they're bringing it back under the Salmon Run branding after Grizzco was added for attempted genocide. You're welcome, Mr. Grizz. Also, just for the record, I quit. Unless Lil Judd decides to restart business at least. In the meantime, enjoy space. Say hi to Rosalina for me. Anyway, with that walking plot hole gone, it's time to finally talk about some real maps.
I solved this in half.
Bluefin Depot is the only Splatoon 1 map remake in this game that actually made the map better. To be fair, I really didn't like Bluefin in Splatoon 1, so it's not like that's an impressive feat. I was not a fan of how narrow its middle platforms were and how hard it was to get between them on certain modes. And this remake fixes that by widening the two mids and having the ramps go both ways on all modes. Also, specific to Splat zones, remember how the zone originally weirdly stuck to one side? I thought they were going to add another zone on the other side or put the zone on a connecting bridge, but what we got was even better. They made the zone move to one side depending on which team's holding it, which is a genius way to reimagine the old zones gimmick on top of providing a new, risky, unique way to play. It also just looks so much nicer now. The lush vegetation and background tourists really sell the idea of this being Bluefin almost a decade later. Not every change made to this map was for the better. Seriously, why is spawn lopsided? But I have to applaud this game for making Bluefin Depot go from a map I'd rather avoid to one I honestly don't mind.
My ship sails in the morning.
Finally, a returning map from 2 I can get behind. To be fair, due to some comments on my 2 map ranking as well as a few subsequent matches, I'm a little more aware of Sturgeon Shipyard's problems. It can get a little lockout heavy at times, especially on zones, and the clam basket is way too close to the podiums, making it a little too easy to score from far away. Despite all that, I still really enjoy this map. The massive bases, intricate mid, wide variety of elevated points, and interesting gimmick of the rising platforms makes me almost always have a good time on this map, even despite its faults. It may not be much, but it gets the job done for me.
Let's get this tin can turned around.
Finally! A
Good.
Splatoon 3 map.
without a bunch of folk bullshit
Design.
in it. Thank you!
Yeah, it may not look like much, but trust me, it was a huge breath of fresh air to finally get a new map that was at least good, after a full year of bad or mediocre Tetris blocks. Ship Shape Cargo Company is simply good. It doesn't really have anything amazing going for it, but there isn't really anything awful about it either. It felt so nice finally having a few options to flank the enemy. I often got jump scared by enemies attacking from behind due to the new options, something that didn't really happen on the prior new maps. It also has plenty of defensive points that feel satisfying to use and slip by. There are still a few things holding this map back from being very good, however, particularly the lack of a proper left side. If there was an extra lower section on the left that connected with the enemy's right side, this map would flow a lot better. Maybe its extra elevation and bridges from turf and zones would appear on every mode that way. Regardless, Ship-Shape Cargo is a solid, fun map. It's just not particularly exceptional due to a missing left side, and it doesn't help that it kinda got overshadowed by a map that released alongside it that we'll get to later.
In the boat! Get in the boat!
Wow, 3 boat maps in a row. I think this game might have a type. Manta Maria was a map I really missed from 2 early in this game's life, so I was very happy to see it come back 6 months after launch, exactly the way I liked it in 2. There are plenty of inkable walls and a good amount of routes around the ship, allowing for tons of unique, sneaky plays. I still wish there were a few sponges scattered around the map, as they'd act as great retreat points, since the map is a little lacking in that department due to a few one-way drops here and there. Even then, I'm still super glad to see Manta Maria come back, and it's easily the best looking Splatoon 2 map in this game. Like, seriously, look at that amazing water. I want to swim in it.
That belongs in a museum.
Out of all the Splatoon 1 maps remade in this game, Museum d'Alfonsino is by far the one that changed the least. It's still noticeably inferior in a few areas, however, with the reduced elevation, removed spawn spinners, and parts of the plat spinners being cut out in the pull update. That last change was honestly so scathing it dropped the map down a whole tier. Despite those clear nerfs, Museum d'Alfonsino is still quite fun. Yeah, the big one-way drop is annoying, and backlines can be hard to deal with here, but there are still various interesting movement options and positions, and the remaining spinners are still quite fun to play around with. It's also nice that it got to keep its unique flank from the right of spawn that sends you straight into mid, unlike Flounder Heights. When this map first came back, many players, myself included, were so happy to finally have a map that was actually unique and took advantage of the game's mechanics. But as time went on, more and more people noticed just how much was lost in the transition from 1 to 3. Even as someone who likes this version of Flounder and finds the hate it gets to be a bit overblown, I can't deny that this version feels way off compared to the original. Let's get the big problem out of the way first, the removal of the right path. In the original, you could move from spawn in pretty much any direction you wanted, and you could advance onto and past mid from any angle. Removing only the right spawn tunnel and making the far right wall uninkable may not seem like too much at first, until you realize how much more limited your options have become. Before, you could take any angle you wanted. Now, it's left side, middle, or bust. It just goes to show how important each component is to a map layout, and how removing even one can make the entire experience way worse. Like, you seriously kept the ghost in the window, but not a vital part of the layout itself? The missing right side isn't the only thing that bugs me, since the art direction here just isn't it. The skybox and lighting getting moved from the evening back to the afternoon takes away so much of the homey, lively atmosphere, and some additional visual hiccups here and there don't help, making the map feel, dare I say it, flat. It feels less like you're hanging out with your friends in a neighborhood and more like you're playing a battle map in a shooter game. Seriously, how did the version from 7 years prior look, feel, and play way better than the modern fancy version? With all that said, why is this map still this high? Because, despite everything, it's still Flounder Heights. The left and middle paths are still there and still functional, despite the former being one way now. There are still plenty of inkable walls in the middle towers, allowing for many unique plays. The spawn regions are a lot wider now, which almost makes up for the removed right tunnel. And while the reduced height also hurt the presentation, it at least makes the map easier to traverse for certain weapons. So yeah, I still enjoy this version of Flounder Heights quite a bit, and always enjoy seeing it on rotation, even though I now get depressed whenever I see how it used to be. Seriously, would it not have been better to just directly port over the old map instead of remaking it from the ground up?
Welcome to Walmart. Get your shit and get out.
Mako Mart is simple, clean, and effective, just like it was back in 2. The spawn regions have good routes and defensive positions. There are plenty of movement options in mid thanks to the surplus of inkable walls. Basically, everything here comes together nicely to form a solid, fun map, despite not being anything exceptional. Just like in the 2 ranking, I don't really have much else to say. And I also just really want to finish this up since this video has kind of been going on for a while now, and because my computer thought it would be funny to wipe half the f***ing script from existence.
What happened to you?
There is no map in this game that fascinates me more than Mahi Mahi Resort. It may seem like a complete betrayal of its Splatoon 1 counterpart at first glance, and for a while it kinda was. Seriously, if it wasn't for that rework, this map would have been lucky to make it to C tier. That is until you look closely and notice that the core skeleton of Mahi is still there. The spawn trailing you into mid, the inner side islands, the middle platforms, the extra terrain when the water drops, it's there. It also looks visually gorgeous in this game, with a higher poly background and amazing water. It's noticeably inferior, sure, but this new version still retains the heart and essence of the original Mahi Mahi, and it's still a lot of fun to play. On Turf War and Splat Zones. Because this map was so small initially, the layout, primarily in mid, completely changes depending on the mode. Maps getting adjustments to accommodate for different modes is expected, but Mahi straight up becomes a completely different map depending on the mode. So much so that I'm gonna do something I haven't done for any other map. That's right, I'm gonna rank every single mode on Mahi Mahi Resort in Splatoon 3 individually. Number 6 is Rainmaker. The only mode here I actively hate. It's just 2 lame-ass ramps, it's short, it's narrow, and it snowballs harder than that one Mario 64 DS minigame. Number 5, Tower Control. A guilty pleasure of mine for how much platforming there is before the water drops. It can just get a little snowbally towards the end. Number 4, Clam Blitz. The Rainmaker layout, except not terrible. There are a decent number of ways to get around here, especially once the water drops. I just wish it wasn't so flat and that the podiums from Turf and Zones were here. Number 3, Turf War. Finally, a layout somewhat reminiscent of Splatoon 1. Mahi Mahi in its island hopping, pool jumping, summertime fun. It's really fun to hop across the islands and platforms to try and get the jump on enemies, and it's still hype as hell when the water drops, even if it doesn't affect as much of the map as it used to. It's only number 3 because, well, it's Turf War. Number 2, Tricolor Turf War. One of my favorite Tricolor maps. It honestly kinda feels like a shifty station. While a little defender favored, it still has various movement options and the unique mechanic of the water dropping when the first Ultra Signal is taken, vastly turning the— I already made that joke in the first game's ranking. I also want to take a moment to highlight how gorgeous this map looks at night, with the calm, misty lighting atop the pool. I always try to get at least one match on Mahi every Splatfest for this reason. And number 1, Splat Zones. What a shock that the only ranked mode with a layout somewhat faithful to Splatoon 1 is the map's best mode. Tons of defensive options with the podiums, various ways to get around with the islands, the extra turf when the water drops. This mode has it all. An absolute joy to play on, and easily one of my favorite zones maps in this game. Anyway, that's my ranking of every mode in Splatoon 3's Mahi Mahi Resort. I'd love to see everyone else's rankings in the comments. This map is certainly interesting, with how much it differs between each mode, and between its highs and lows, it's one of the most fun maps in this game to talk about, and depending on the mode, to play on too. Though it would have maybe cracked the top 5 if they kept it as it was in Splatoon 1. Seriously, was it that hard to just directly port over the original map instead of remaking it from scratch and forgetting why it worked so well? Same goes true for every other Splatoon 1 map in this game that isn't Bluefin. It probably would have taken a lot less effort to just take the old layout, slap on some fancy new textures, and call it a day. You would save not only a lot of dev time, but also so much of the player base's sanity by not trying to fix maps that already worked perfectly fine. Why are you guys the way you are?
Here comes the aeroplane!
Marlin Airport is the Anchovy Games sequel we've all been waiting for. It has a massive spawn area with so many different defensive and exit points. The middle region is very wide and open, with a bunch of propeller lifts that are tons of fun to screw people over with. It does kinda suck that the biggest one is the only way to enter the enemy base on 3.5 modes, but like I said, it's a big one. And besides, it's a ton of fun to see how long you can last in their base before getting killed. Marlin may not be as dynamic or twisty as Anchovy Games was, but it's still a very fun map with a ton of solid options, and it's at least a hell of a lot better than 2's version of Anchovy. Plus, this map has the clear advantage with the background and presentation. Like, the propeller lifts are scissor lifts that move when you use them. That's so cool! Speaking of which, there's an off-the-hook plane in the background, which means that I never thought we'd get such a great map set in a ramen restaurant of all places, but Robo Ramen proved me otherwise. It seems basic at first, with spawn having some defensive ground and a good handful of routes to mid, until you jump down and notice the path going beneath the bridge that loops all the way around the middle platform. Given how small said platform is, it's wise to use that path to sneak around and surprise enemies to gain the advantage. After over a year of overly linear, choke point infested maps, getting a new map that not only allows but actively encourages flanking is a huge breath of fresh air. It feels like the devs took nearly every criticism about this game's maps to heart and applied everything they had learned to make one of the most dynamic maps in this game, even though my teammates always forget the lower paths exist and play it like any other S3 original. Robo Ramen is so damn fun, and I hope they bring it back immediately in the next game. Can't wait for them to completely ignore it and bring back something like Brine Water Springs instead.
There's a crab! There's a crab! There's a crab!
In the summer of 23, I was pretty much done with the game. The new maps were all just the same copy-pasted hallways, the updates and events weren't doing nearly enough to keep me hooked, and I just pretty much lost all faith that the game would improve. Then, that fall, it happened. They finally released a good new map, one that single-handedly saved this game for me. That map is none other than Crableg Capital. It has one of the most breathtaking aesthetics in the whole series. It has plenty of open space, allowing for so much freedom to move. It actually tries to take advantage of its setting and theme instead of just using them as a backdrop. Throughout the map, there is a ton of wide space to move around, especially in mid. Also in mid are some inkable walls you can swim up to reach elevated platforms and connecting grates. The upper grades and lower ground both have their advantages and disadvantages, and it's really fun to switch between the two when the situation calls for it. It's a lot like Hammerhead Bridge. No, the real Hammerhead Bridge, just with a little more space on the ground. The grates also lead into the enemy base, and while there definitely should have been more routes to the base across every mode, I've still found myself using the route a ton thanks to its wide shape and small patch of inkable ground that provides a nice boost. On Rainmaker, a second route is added, giving you another option to jump into the base to sneak up or push the Rainmaker further. And on Clamblitz, a third route opens up, and it's a ton of fun to take so many angles into the enemy base while defending the 3 entry points to your base from them. Don't get me wrong, this map is still deeply flawed. There are a lot of one-way drops, backlines could be a bit of a handful, a few extra inkable walls and cover would have been nice, and the less said about tower control the better. Aside from those, they did it! They finally made a good-ass new map, one that had me closely monitoring the map rotations just for even a single chance to play it again. Even with its flaws, Crableg Capital has so much charm, depth, and polish, on top of it reviving my love for this game, and I can't wait for them to bring it back in 2 games and remove everything that made it so good.
It's grand, and it's central.
And it's a station.
Lemuria Hub is, at least to me, the best map they could have ended this game off with. To start, it's so aesthetically pleasing, with a calm sunrise and highly detailed, bustling background setting. Splatoon 1 and especially 2 both had a unique urban city life feel to them that was largely absent from 3 for the longest time. And seeing that vibe return in full force for 3's final map is such a relief. As we've seen before, a map's great visuals mean nothing if the layout doesn't deliver, and Lemuria's layout more than delivers. This map uses lateral symmetry akin to Salt Spray Rig and Skipper Pavilion, and as fun as they weren't exactly the most structurally sound. Lemuria has big bases with various ways to approach the north end, by either charging down through the middle or sneaking off to the side to go as far around the main complex as possible. The north end is where the map truly shines, with a turfable bridge hanging over some more turf and inkable walls and ramps on either side of it. Moving around mid feels so fluid, dynamic, and fun with how many movements and positions you can take, and I rarely stay in the same spot there for more than a few seconds due to how quickly and efficiently I can reposition. Topped off with some extra elevated ground for backlines and the moving platforms being fun to use if you know how to use them. Lemuria is a super fun map that so many people of different skill levels and weapon classes can thrive on. Yeah, it has problems. The moving platforms can fiddle with the Rainmaker. This one wall that shows up on turf and tower control is annoying, and I really wish it wasn't there at all. And a few more inkable walls, particularly in the north end, would have been nice. Yeah, it's not the Reef. Hell, I think I also like Splatoon 1 Flounder and Mahi more. But Lemuria Hub was still a fantastic final test for the map designers, and I find it poetic how this game's first original map was its worst, and its last was its best. Wait a minute, why is it not number 1? I checked, I counted, that's all 24 maps in this game ranked and accounted for. Did I seriously forget something? I mean, come on, especially with how long I've been working on this video for you, there's no way we could have forgotten to include such a grand... think of a better send-off for this game than this, and I don't see how the eventual Final Festive 3 could possibly top it. They did it. The Grand Festival might just be the single greatest multiplayer event the franchise has ever seen. It brought every idol together on a magnificent venue to perform so many songs from across the series, celebrating its history, world, and themes beautifully. The hype only increased with each day, peaking on the 3rd day with 2 things: 3 Wishes, the greatest goddamn piece of music in the series, and the Grand Splatlands Bull. Entering the arena with the idols hyping you up and the crowd cheering you on is the perfect way to begin the battle, before the attackers and defenders are launched into a tight death bowl where anything goes. The spawn regions quickly funnel you into a tight arena with various paths and inkable walls, complete with the ground around the ultra signal rising up when a player steps on it. It's an insanely hectic scramble for the signal where it's constantly anyone's game, and I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Adding to the hype is the only song playing here being the Grandfest exclusive Rainbow Color Incantation, a bombastic medley of songs from all three idol groups. Speaking of which, if the second ultra signal is taken, rather than spawning another sprinkler, the idol group representing the team that got the signal will show up themselves to hype you up and fire fizz bangs. Getting cheered on live by the Squid Sisters or Off the Hook or Deep Cut in such an important battle is indescribably hype, especially since the music that plays during the final minute changes depending on the idol group on stage. This map and the rest of the Grand Festival is everything. A challenging, intense championship match to determine which team comes out on top, a hype celebration of this series and its legacy, and an insanely fun deathmatch where anything goes. It has flaws, the bulk of which are just fundamental issues with Tricolor and this game's Splatfest system, but its strengths greatly outweigh them. I'm so happy I got to experience this map with everyone else, and I'm sure we'll all remember that fateful night for years to come. You really just had to be there. Now please put it in private battles so people who missed out on Grandfest can still play it. Well, that was Splatoon 3. It's been quite a wild ride with this game these past 2 years, full of high highs and low lows. But for as much as this game pisses me off, for as big of a chokehold it put me in for 2 years, for how many chances it wasted to be the true ultimate Splatoon game, I still love it. It controls like a dream, it has so many fun weapons and modes, the music slaps as always, there are so many great quality of life changes, the world it takes place in is still an absolute delight, and most of all, it made me fall in love with the Splatoon series all over again. If 2 brought me into Splatoon, 3 locked me in. I can now consider myself a die-hard Splatoon fan thanks to this game, and you bet I'll be there when the next game comes around. But for the love of God, do not make the same mistakes with it. Fix the netcode and matchmaking, give us good, unique maps out of the gate, keep the players engaged with a good amount of content each update, give us a good amount of weapon kits at a steady rate, don't bring Tenna missiles back again, remove Respawn Punisher, revert Splatfest back to 2 teams, don't put time limits on every new mode, actually bother to listen to and communicate with the players to implement the changes we want throughout the game's life, and for the love of all things holy, ship the damn merchandise on time! With that, I'm finally free. Until the next game comes out and breaks me again, and outside the remaining seasonal Splatfest, since I enjoy those, I can finally play games at my own pace without binding myself to a single season pass. So Splatoon, until next time, stay fresh,